Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, dear listeners, hello and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for tuning into this solo episode. Now, before I get into the main topic, I wish I could ask any of you face to face how many of you clicked on this episode, because the start of the title is I messed up. Because it is a bit of a clickbaity title, isn't it? It got your attention, didn't it? Oh, I wish I could know. And if you want to message me on Instagram to let me know if that's why you clicked on it, you would make my day. I'm literally sitting here chuckling to myself, wondering if I did get your attention or not with that title. Anyway, why did I mess up? So, when I recorded episode 130... suspense, 132, how to track calories when eating out. I couldn't find the exact number of the episode. When I recorded that episode, I initially said, hey, if you're going to eat out at a restaurant, don't bother logging your food ingredient by ingredient, because it is going to do your head in and it is unnecessary. However, I went on annual leave a couple of weeks ago and I flew over to America, where I spent a week in Disney World, where most of my meals every day were eaten out. And while I still largely agree with what I said in that episode, whereby I wouldn't bother tracking every single ingredient in every single meal out, I experienced situations when that actually made more sense and it was easier than trying to track the meal as a whole. To begin with, much like I did in episode 132, I want to open with a mindset related topic, and I am sure none of you, dear listeners, are surprised. You know how big I am on mindsets. Anyway, a point I didn't quite make in episode 132 is, when is it appropriate to track the calories in the meals that you're eating out? Of course, it goes without saying that it's appropriate if right now tracking calories and macros is a good tool for your personal toolbox. But even when that's the case and you are regularly tracking calories and macros, you may not always benefit from tracking a meal out, and you may benefit from tracking it to a less accurate degree than some of the suggestions that I've made in these two episodes so far. For example, if you're somebody who is trying to transition away from tracking calories and you are in a place when you're not tracking and you're quite confident not doing so and successful when you're at home, but you've not quite taken the plunge and you're still tracking when you're eating out because you're a little bit afraid, then I would say that it may be time to push yourself out of your comfort zone and forego tracking a meal out that you're having once in a while. Similarly, if you're away for the entire week or for 2 weeks and you're on a very active holiday, you're sightseeing, you're traveling to a foreign country, you're with other people, so you're really busy all day, you're doing a lot of steps, and you're eating out more than one meal every single day, it could be quite cumbersome to track every meal that you have out with the degree of accuracy and the amount of work that I am suggesting you utilize in these two episodes. If that is the case for you, then I would recommend that you talk to your coach so that they can appropriately prepare you to feel confident not tracking all of the meals that you might be having out. Or at the very least, if you don't have a coach or if you don't have the time for your coach to prepare you, then listen to the episodes that I recorded most recently with coach Brandon Da Cruz on how to stay on track when traveling. And those are episodes 122 and 123. Those were geared towards fat loss, but that's because fat loss is the hardest budget to stick to, or rather, a calorie deficit is the most challenging budget to stick to when you're traveling, which means that even if you're at maintenance or in a surplus, you are definitely going to benefit from all the suggestions that we made in those two episodes. Now, if you are going away for a week or longer and you want to track your calories and macros, it could be appropriate to simply track every single meal and to put a little bit more work and spend a little bit more time doing so. For example, I'll talk a little bit about how I went to Disney World, and I did decide to track my calories and macros every day, even though I was eating 1 or 2 meals out every day. But that's because, to me, first of all, it was relevant to the intentions that I went into that holiday with. But second of all, I have so much experience estimating the caloric and macronutrient content in meals that it didn't really take that long for me. It didn't seem cumbersome. It didn't stress me out. If anything, it's kind of fun for me because I really love nutrition. What I'm trying to say is that tracking a meal out, whether more loosely, accepting a larger degree of potential error, or with a little bit more effort and potentially more accurately, is neither better nor worse than not tracking that meal out in a vacuum. It comes down to your circumstances, your current goal, and the intention behind it. If the intention is positive, you want to show up for yourself, you have a goal that requires tracking that meal out. For example, you're trying to lose fat and you don't have the amount of experience required to accomplish fat loss without tracking a meal out. It makes perfect sense to track it and to spend a little bit more time on doing so by following the suggestions I gave in episode 132 and that I'm going to give in this episode as well. On the other hand, if the intention is less positive and it comes from a place of an eating disorder or disordered eating behaviors and thoughts, then it may not be appropriate for you to track at all, or it may be more appropriate to, at the very least, track more loosely. Because I also understand that if you are trying to transition away from tracking calories and you come from a disordered eating or active eating disorder background, then it's going to feel really difficult to just jump ship and stop tracking altogether. So it could be that at this stage you may need to track just a little bit more flexibly as opposed to trying not to track at all. And then when you've achieved that milestone, you can gradually move on to not tracking at all. A final but really important point I want to make on this is that when you're at the beginning of your nutrition management journey, it makes sense that you're going to rely a lot on your calorie tracking app because you simply don't know the calories and macros of the typical foods that you eat. And then when you go on holiday, you're going to be even less familiar with the calories and macronutrient content of some of the meals you might have abroad or wherever you go. However, the goal isn't to rely on the app so much forever. The goal is for the app to teach you about the nutritional content in the food that you eat and about appropriate portion sizes for you. And then the ultimate goal is to be able to roughly reproduce those portion sizes and those food choices that make up a health promoting dietary pattern without having to rely so heavily on an app. So if you think that you need to track super closely every time you have a meal out, otherwise you have no idea how to make balanced and health promoting choices that are aligned with your goals and needs, then the problem isn't whether you should track or not track. The problem is that you need to focus more on the quality of your food and on how to create a meal structure and how to create meals that serve you and your goals as well as your well-being and health, as opposed to focusing as much as you are on hitting the numbers in the app. When I get a client to focus less on the numbers and to use them as a guide and more on the food on their plate, they feel better. They find it easier to achieve those numbers without obsessing over them, and they ultimately get better results. So, hopefully, this gives you some food for thought regarding whether you want to track with more precision and spending a little bit more time on it, or whether you want to track more loosely, or whether you're going to ignore these two episodes because they are just not appropriate to where you're at in your fitness journey. And with that said, let's move into the main topic of the podcast. So, what I want to do in this episode is explain under which circumstances it makes more sense to track meals out ingredient by ingredient, and give you my main tips on how to do so effectively. As for the circumstances, I will track a meal out ingredient by ingredient when all the ingredients are clearly separate. For example, if you're eating at a buffet and you can choose what you want and how much you want, and you get a plate and you clearly put a portion of rice on that plate, and then next to it a portion of green beans, and then next to that a portion of chicken thigh, then you can track that ingredient by ingredient, and it is going to be easier than trying to find a steamed rice and green beans and chicken thigh meal from some restaurant or some local supermarket. And any meal like that could be logged ingredient by ingredient. So if you go to a standard restaurant and you get steak with a side of mashed potatoes and another side of vegetables, that's also a meal that you can track ingredient by ingredient. I would not even attempt to track a meal ingredient by ingredient if you were having an Indian curry, which comes with the curry broth with or without coconut milk, and then a mix of spices, and then the vegetables, and then the meat or the vegetarian or vegan protein, and it's all mixed together. And unless you asked for the specific recipe from the cook, you would not really be able to approximate what it is that you were having. Moving on to my tips to track this meal ingredient by ingredient, what I would do is open up ChatGPT and ask it some questions. And this is assuming that you are planning this meal ahead of time. You already looked at the menu and you can read the menu right in front of you, so you know what it is that you are going to be having. Or if you're doing this in hindsight, that you at least took a picture of everything that was on your plate so that you can report it to ChatGPT. And I'm going to use an example meal, but you can apply these principles to any meal of your choice. So let's go with the original example where you're having white rice, steamed green beans, and chicken thighs in teriyaki sauce, which is actually very similar to one of the main meals I had when I was in Disney World, but that's beside the point. So what you're going to do is you're going to start with any of these ingredients. Let's go with the steamed rice. And you're going to ask ChatGPT, what's a standard portion of cooked steamed white rice served at restaurants in the country that you're in right now? So in my case, I was in Disney World in Florida, so I would have asked ChatGPT, what's a standard portion of steamed white rice in grams that they serve at restaurants in America? And ChatGPT is going to provide you with a list of options. It's going to tell you, well, if this is a typical restaurant, it's going to be somewhere around 200 grams. If it's a gourmet restaurant, then the portions might be a little bit smaller, so it might be closer to 150 grams. If it's a side, then again, it could be a smaller portion. If it's an entree, it's going to be a bigger portion. Make sure that you tell ChatGPT that you want the cooked portion, otherwise it will potentially not differentiate, and there is a large difference in the calories in cooked rice versus uncooked rice. So just make sure to remind it of what you want. Now, when it gives you that estimation, you are going to have to make a judgment call. And in my view, since typically restaurant portions are bigger than what you would normally prepare at home, then I would choose the bigger portion that ChatGPT provides. When it comes to logging it into your calorie tracking app, you can refer to international databases to get the most accurate estimation of calories and macronutrients that you can. So if you're in America, you can refer to USDA. If you're in the UK, that's COFID, COFID. If you're in Australia, that's NUTTAB, NUT, like nut butter, TAB, TAB. What you're going to do then is you're going to write steamed white rice with the acronym for the database of choice. So if you're in America, you're going to search for steamed white rice USDA in your calorie tracking app. And then you're going to choose the entry that matches the international database entry, and you're going to select the portion that ChatGPT provided. And that's your rice logged. And then you would go through the same process with every other part of the meal. You could then combine that with choosing suitable restaurant entries from other restaurants that do offer the calories on their menu. For example, none of the databases that I mentioned might have a chicken thighs in teriyaki sauce entry. But what you may be able to find is a restaurant that has calories and macros on the menu that does offer chicken thighs in teriyaki sauce as a side. Sometimes you may not even be able to find that, but what you can find is the chicken thighs in the USDA database. And then separately, you can ask ChatGPT, how much teriyaki sauce does the average Asian restaurant in America or whatever country you're in put on their food? And ChatGPT might say around 30 grams. Then you are going to find teriyaki sauce in your calorie tracking app, whether from an international database or if you don't find that particular entry, then it may have to be a teriyaki sauce from a supermarket. And you can log that and log it as 30 grams. Or some restaurants have sauces and dips that they offer on the side and they provide the calories for those. So it's always worth looking that up. In any case, my point is you don't just have to rely on international databases. That's what I would suggest, and that's what I personally did while I was in Disney World, because when I went to certain restaurants, they had entrees that were very similar to existing restaurants with the calories available on the menu. But I also often ate at the food court in the resort that I was staying at, in which case I could more mix and match different ingredients and have them clearly separate on my plate. And that's when I found that it made more sense to simply log each individual ingredient. Another example is when I eat pizza, which is often, it's one of my favorite restaurant meals, so I have it once a week or once every other week. I don't actually like mozzarella on pizza because I don't like cheese. And I know I am basically losing half of my audience just by making that statement, but I have never liked cheese in my life, my dear listeners, and that's just the truth. I need to be honest with you. I want to be authentic. And so because I don't want cheese, when I log pizza, what I do is a long time ago, I found a restaurant in the UK that provides calories and macros for specifically a marinara pizza, which is a very common Italian pizza that just comes with tomato sauce, basil, garlic, and olive oil. So I always log that as my base. And then I usually refer to Bella Italia for any other ingredients that I might want to put on my pizza on top of that, because Bella Italia has a list of extra toppings that you can add to the pizzas that they provide. And if you're not in the UK, Bella Italia is a restaurant franchise that supposedly serves Italian food. I'm not the biggest fan, but it's useful for the purpose of tracking my calories and macros. And my favorite toppings on pizza include mushrooms, red pepper, and chicken. This combination is just great for me, and it just so happens that Bella Italia has these exact same toppings as extras that you can add on top of your pizza. So I just log each one using the calories and macros that they provide. And that is all. That is a wrap for today's podcast. Essentially, this was a sequel to episode 132 because, as I said at the beginning, I messed up. And when I recorded that podcast, I didn't think about the fact that, yeah, under some circumstances, it might be better to log meals out ingredient by ingredient. And that's my fault for making an absolutist statement like the one I made in episode 132 when I said, nah, don't bother logging ingredient by ingredient, as if it's never appropriate. It serves me right for making an absolutist statement that implies the word never or always, which I've been striving for years not to do, but clearly I still need to work on. In any case, I hope that this was helpful, and I will talk to you very soon. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.